There comes a time when you realize your body doesn't respond the same way anymore. What used to work in your 20s or 30s doesn't seem to bring results in your 40s. You train, you eat well, but building muscle feels harder than ever, and the fear of losing muscle mass with age starts to creep in. But before I reveal the secrets to overcome this, I want to remind you of something special. We prepared an exclusive guide we developed especially for you, and it will only be available for a limited time. This material brings practical tips that can accelerate your results and help you avoid common mistakes. It's a discreet resource, but one that can truly make a difference in your training. In today's video, I'll show you the 8 things nobody tells you about gaining muscle after 40. You'll discover why factors like protein intake, training volume, and even rep ranges need adjustments. These small details change everything when it comes to real long-term results. And that's exactly what will keep your muscles strong, even as the years go by. If you apply these strategies, you won't just maintain your physique, you can actually build a stronger, more balanced body. Age stops being a barrier and becomes just a number. Your posture improves, your energy rises, and your confidence grows with every step forward. Now let's dive straight into the points that will transform the way you train. So, first things first, let's establish a foundational concept. Does muscle building change with age? Yes, absolutely. To pretend otherwise is just silly. After your 20s and early 30s, which for many represent the peak of their anabolic potential, certain physiological factors begin to shift. This isn't a switch that flips on your 40th birthday, mind you. It's a gradual process. Think of it less like falling off a cliff and more like walking down a very, very gentle slope. The key is to recognize you're on that slope and adjust your footing accordingly so you can keep moving forward instead of slipping back. It's about being smarter, more strategic, and more in tune with your body's signals. The primary variables we need to re-examine are the big ones: our nutritional approach, especially protein intake, our exercise selection, favoring movements that provide a great stimulus with lower joint stress, our programming, specifically the rep ranges we live in, and yes, the hormonal milieu. Your body's response to a training stimulus isn't quite as robust as it was when you were 22. The signal for muscle protein synthesis might be a little quieter, and the background noise of catabolic processes might be a little louder. Our job, as intelligent lifters, is not to panic, but to amplify that signal and dampen that noise through intelligent training and nutrition. For example, the amount of protein that triggered a maximal muscle-building response in your 20s might not be sufficient in your 40s or 50s. We'll get into the specifics later, but this concept of anabolic resistance is a real thing. Your muscle cells become a bit more stubborn, a bit more hard of hearing to the growth signals from protein. So we have to speak a little louder by providing more high-quality protein per meal. It's a simple adjustment, but it's one that many older lifters completely miss, and they wonder why their recovery and growth have stalled despite eating the same way they always have. Similarly, your connective tissues, your tendons and ligaments, don't have the same youthful elasticity and rapid healing capacity they once did. This doesn't mean you can't train hard, it just means how you train hard needs to evolve. Constantly chasing 1-rep maxes on brutally heavy low-rep sets might not be the most sustainable or productive strategy anymore. The risk-to-reward ratio begins to shift. We might find that higher rep sets, with a focus on controlled eccentrics and impeccable form, deliver a potent muscle-building stimulus with a fraction of the joint wear and tear. It's about finding the minimum effective dose of stress for the joints and the maximum effective dose for the muscles. The rep range conversation is also critical. As we age, there's a preferential loss of fast-twitch muscle fibers, the ones most responsible for explosive, powerful movements. This, coupled with changes in the nervous system, means that grinding out super heavy sets of 3 to 5 reps might not only be riskier, but also less effective for hypertrophy than it used to be. Your body may now be better suited to thrive in slightly higher rep ranges, like the 8 to 15 or even 10 to 20 rep zone, where you can achieve deep muscular fatigue and a massive pump without beating up your joints. And finally, the hormonal aspect. Yes, testosterone levels tend to decline gradually with age, but this is often overstated as the sole reason for a decline in gains. The truth is, for most natural lifters, the fluctuations of testosterone within the normal physiological range have a much smaller impact on muscle growth than factors like training volume, intensity, and protein intake. We can't stop the tide of aging, but we can build a very effective dam with smart training, proper nutrition, and sufficient sleep. mitigating the effects of these hormonal shifts to a very significant degree. Understanding these interconnected factors is the first and most crucial step. It's not about being weaker or less capable. It's about being a more experienced, more intelligent athlete. You're trading some of that youthful, brute force recovery for a more refined, strategic approach. You're no longer just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. You're using a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And when you embrace this new paradigm, you unlock the potential for incredible, sustainable progress for years and even decades to come. This isn't the end of the road, it's just a new, more interesting part of the journey. Now let's talk about a word that gets thrown around a lot to scare people over 40 sarcopenia. This is the clinical term for age-related muscle loss. You'll see headlines and articles claiming that once you hit your 30s, you start losing 3 to 5% of your muscle mass per decade, and it's this inevitable, terrifying slide into frailty. This narrative is incredibly misleading and for the most part fundamentally wrong. It creates a sense of learned helplessness that no matter what you do, the forces of aging will strip away your hard-earned muscle. This is a myth that needs to be busted, and busted hard. The reality is that significant involuntary muscle loss, true sarcopenia, typically doesn't even begin to be a major concern until much later in life, often around the age of 50, and even then, its severity is massively dictated by lifestyle. The classic studies that established those scary statistics were often looking at the general sedentary population. They were observing people who, as they got older, moved less, ate poorly, and generally disengaged from physical activity. So, were they losing muscle because they turned 50, or were they losing muscle because they stopped using it? The evidence points overwhelmingly to the latter. Let's be crystal clear. The primary driver of muscle loss as we get older is not the number on our birth certificate, it is inactivity. It is the cessation of providing your muscles with a reason to exist. Your body is an incredibly efficient, adaptation-driven machine. It operates on a use it or lose it principle. If you consistently challenge your muscles with resistance training, you are sending a powerful, undeniable signal to your body that this tissue is valuable, necessary, and must be maintained and even grown. If you stop sending that signal, your body, in its ruthless efficiency, will say, well, this muscle is metabolically expensive to maintain, and we're not using it, so let's get rid of it. Think about it logically. If you took a 25-year-old, put their arm in a cast for 6 weeks and told them not to exercise, what would happen? They would experience significant, rapid muscle atrophy in that arm. Is it because they suddenly aged 30 years? Of course not. It's because the stimulus for maintenance was removed. The process is fundamentally the same for a 45 or 55-year-old, it just happens against a slightly different physiological backdrop. The core mechanism is disuse atrophy, not some magical, age-dependent muscle-melting process. So, the fear-mongering around sarcopenia starting in your 30s is just not supported by the data for active individuals. If you are lifting weights, eating adequate protein, and living an active lifestyle, you are actively fighting and, in most cases, completely negating this process well into middle age and beyond. The problem isn't aging itself. It's the lifestyle patterns that often accompany aging in the general population: less activity, more sitting, and a shift away from physical pursuits. By simply choosing to remain a lifter, you are placing yourself in a completely different category. You are not the sedentary average. The rules that apply to people who stop moving do not apply to you. It's crucial to make this mental shift. Don't internalize the statistics that were gathered from a population you don't belong to. You are not destined to become frail and weak. You are in direct control of the most powerful tool for maintaining muscle mass throughout your life: resistance training. The stimulus you provide in the gym is the antidote to sarcopenia. Therefore, the conversation needs to shift away from how do I stop this inevitable muscle loss, to how do I continue to provide the optimal stimulus for muscle growth and maintenance. It's a proactive stance, not a defensive one. You are the master of your muscular fate. Aging might introduce a few new variables into the equation, but the fundamental formula remains the same. Stimulate, feed, recover, repeat. Don't let the scary-sounding medical terms discourage you. They describe what happens in the absence of effort, not in the presence of it. If the primary driver of muscle loss is inactivity, then the logical conclusion is that staying active should preserve it. And folks, the research on this is not just encouraging, it's incredibly compelling, and should be a source of massive motivation for all of us. The science gives us a clear picture that an active lifestyle is the single most important determinant of your muscular health as you age, far outweighing the chronological number itself. Let's look at some of the hard evidence that backs this up, because it completely shatters the old paradigm of inevitable decline. There was a fascinating study that looked at a group of master athletes. These weren't just casual gym goers. These were people who had been consistently and seriously training for years, with an age range stretching all the way up to 81 years old. The researchers used advanced imaging techniques to precisely measure their lean body mass and body composition over time. What they found was nothing short of remarkable. Even in the oldest participants, the ones in their late 70s and early 80s, there was no statistically significant loss of lean mass. Let that sink in. People who were octogenarians were maintaining their muscle mass because they continued to use it. This is a direct contradiction to the idea that sarcopenia is an automatic, age-driven process. If it were, these athletes should have been losing muscle tissue regardless of their training, perhaps just at a slower rate. But they weren't. Their commitment to an active, stimulating lifestyle provided a powerful enough signal to their bodies to completely offset the supposed inevitable decline. This tells us that the use it or lose it principle doesn't have an expiration date. It's as true at 80 as it is at 20. The body's ability to adapt and maintain tissue in response to demand is incredibly robust and persistent throughout the human lifespan. This isn't just one outlier study either. A growing body of literature supports this conclusion. When researchers compare master athletes to their age-matched sedentary peers, the difference is night and day. The sedentary individuals show the classic signs of sarcopenia: reduced muscle mass, decreased strength, and increased body fat. The athletes, however, often have a body composition that more closely resembles that of healthy, active individuals decades younger. They are, in a very real biological sense, slowing down the aging process in their musculoskeletal system. What does this mean for you, the lifter in your 40s, 50s, or 60s? It means you have every reason to be optimistic. The path to preserving your strength and physique is not a mystery. It's not about finding some secret anti-aging pill or hormone therapy. It is the continuation of the very thing you are likely already doing, consistently showing up to the gym, training with intelligent effort, and challenging your muscles to adapt. You are actively participating in the single most effective strategy for defying the statistics. Your training is your shield against sarcopenia. So, when you feel a twinge of doubt, or when you read another article about the woes of getting older, remember these studies. Remember the 81-year-old athletes who are still holding on to their hard-earned muscle. They are the living proof of what is possible. They are the evidence that your efforts in the gym are not just for today or for next summer's beach trip. They are a long-term investment in your future health, vitality, and quality of life. The choice to remain active is the choice to remain strong. The takeaway here is profoundly empowering. Don't let your age define your potential. Let your actions define it. The narrative that you should be winding down, taking it easy, and accepting a lesser version of yourself is a story written for and about sedentary people. You are not sedentary. You are a lifter. You are an athlete. And the science shows unequivocally that as long as you continue to be one, your muscles will get the message loud and clear. Alright, let's tackle another huge piece of dogma that gets thrown at older lifters. The idea that your recovery abilities fall off a cliff and you need tons of extra rest days. We're often told that a workout that a 25-year-old could recover from in 48 hours will take a 45-year-old a full week to bounce back from. This leads people to slash their training frequency and volume, often to levels that are too low to stimulate any real progress, all out of fear of overtraining their supposedly fragile, aging bodies. This idea, folks, is wildly exaggerated and in many contexts, just plain wrong. The research on recovery in older versus younger populations is fascinating and often counterintuitive. When scientists have actually measured the key markers of recovery, the story is much different from the gym lore. For example, let's look at strength recovery. Studies have compared how quickly younger and older trained individuals regain their peak strength in a specific muscle group after a hard workout. The results consistently show that the timelines are remarkably similar. If a group of 20-somethings takes 48 to 72 hours to get back to 100% strength, the group of 60-somethings often takes about 48 to 72 hours. there's no massive, week-long delay. What about hormonal recovery? People assume that a hard training session will crash an older person's testosterone for an extended period. Again, the research doesn't really support this. Studies tracking the acute hormonal response to resistance exercise show that while the peak response might be slightly blunted in older men, the recovery back to baseline follows a very similar trajectory to that of younger men. There's no evidence of a prolonged state of hormonal suppression that would necessitate dramatically increased rest periods between sessions for the same body part. The endocrine system, while different, is still resilient. Here's the real kicker: muscle soreness, or delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. We all tend to use soreness as a proxy for how hard we trained and how much recovery we'll need. Intuitively, you'd think older individuals would get much more sore and for longer. The research actually shows the opposite is often true. Multiple studies have found that older adults report less muscle soreness and show lower markers of muscle damage, like creatine kinase, after a standardized bout of eccentric exercise compared to younger adults. This might be due to changes in connective tissue or inflammatory responses, but the bottom line is the "I'm too old, I'll be sore for a week" excuse doesn't hold much water. So if strength, hormones, and even soreness recover at similar rates, why does this myth of needing massive amounts of extra recovery time persist? A few things might be at play. Older lifters might have more accumulated joint and tendon aches that can be conflated with poor muscle recovery. A heavy squat day might leave your quads feeling recovered in 2 days, but your knees might ache for 4. This is an issue of managing connective tissue stress, which we'll cover, not a systemic failure of muscle recovery. Additionally, lifestyle factors like sleep quality and overall stress can be different for a 45-year-old with a career and kids versus a 22-year-old college student. The danger of believing this myth is that it leads to undertraining. If you believe you can only train your chest once a week because you're 50, you're leaving a ton of potential growth on the table. The evidence suggests that for most older lifters, a frequency of training each muscle group 2 to 3 times per week is not only possible but likely optimal, just as it is for younger lifters. The key is not to slash frequency, but to intelligently manage the volume and intensity of each individual session. Instead of one giant annihilating chest workout per week, maybe you do 2 moderate, stimulating workouts. The practical application here is to stop thinking of yourself as fragile. Listen to your body, yes, but don't catastrophize every ache and pain. Pay attention to your performance. Are your lifts progressing over the weeks? If so, your recovery is sufficient. Don't let your age be an excuse to program your training like you're made of glass. You are far more resilient and capable of handling a stimulating training frequency than the gym bros would have you believe. Trust the data, trust your performance, and don't be afraid to train like an athlete.